Hello, everyone, and welcome to another great day where we get to talk about Monster Hunter. Now, I love Monster Hunter, obviously, because I talk about it all the time, but what endears me most to any particular game, more so than the mechanics of that game, or the presentation, or even the weapon design in that particular game, which are all huge, is the monsters themselves. That's what's going to determine what my favorite and least favorite Monster Hunter games are. Not completely, but they're going to have probably the biggest impact. So today, I want to take a look back on Wilds, now that base Wilds is finished, and make a tier list of all of the different monsters. Now, I couldn't decide if I wanted to go by order of appearance or by tier. I decided to go by map. So, starting with the first map, Wildspire Wastes. Wrong game. The Windward Plains. uh, Chotacabra. So I'm going to put Chotacabra right here in the C tier. It's a monster that I really like fighting, but more so for a trading dummy. It's interesting and unique. I like the design of the monster, but honestly, so many of the fights, even when you're first starting out, are pretty quick. You don't get to see how much he can really do, and if you take the time to slow things down to see, it's not that much. I like the monster design. It's a cute little guy. It's fun for practicing. It's good for practicing your offsets. It's good for teaching you the new mechanics of the game, but that's about it. I like Chotacabra. So the C tier seems about right. Now, Balahara, I'm going to put in the F tier. Now, none of these monsters are, in my opinion, really bad monsters, but the F tier is where I would put this game would have been fine without it monsters. I know we got that Rompopolo event quest because the developer said Rompopolo was the least hunted monster. Valahara was by far my least hunted monster if I look at the stats. I hunted a sparse handful in the entire time that I played Wilds. In part because it wasn't that interesting of a fight, it wasn't that fun of a fight. It had its minor frustrations, like Balahara could attack you suddenly without realizing it, or from an angle you weren't expecting. It was a little annoying without being challenging enough to be fun, and I just didn't think much of it. I'm also going to put Kumatrice right down in the F tier. Now, I like Kumatrice's design a little bit more. It is just a giant fire chicken, and it's fun, but it feels like it only exists to show off the mechanic of the fire from its tail attacks burning the grass in the Windward Plains. And neat, but that's something you really don't see throughout the game much. Those types of destruction to the environment or effect of the environment that the monsters have with their attacks. It was a neat idea, but he almost feels like a concept monster more than a fully fleshed out monster. Again, incredibly simple move set, which fine for the lower tier monsters, but not very interesting, and I don't think he adds that much. Now, moving on to Deshagama. I'm going to put Deshagama, I think, in the B tier. Everything that I could say about the other monsters being learning monsters goes for Deshagama even more so. Also, I feel like it's a much more challenging fight. It's a much more interesting fight. It's better when you're trying to train up your skills on different weapons. And while the monster design is probably the least interesting out of the four so far, it definitely feels like a good base monster that I think, unlike many other monsters, scales up pretty well with the star system, making it more difficult, hit harder, but still very learnable and can still be really enjoyable, which is not something you can say about all of the higher star level monsters. So next, going to Yankaku. I think I would put Yankaku in the C tier, only because I feel like there were huge improvements in its actual fight. The old Yankaku from previous generations was very annoying. It wasn't very fun to fight, and there's something about doing damage, giving you burn, and it flailing around while it did it that made it for some reason just much more frustrating than if the monster seemed like it was taking the fight seriously. I think its fight in Wilds is much more improved. A lot of those frustrations are gone, mainly because of the extra mobility of the hunter. And while I don't see much in its fight, it is a fun monster. It is a monster that I've seen a lot. I'm very familiar with. It's nice to see it again, and I'm glad that they have made it a more enjoyable fight. So just for that, I'd put it the C tier. If it wasn't for those factors about it being an updated version of an older, more frustrating fight, maybe the D tier. Next, I have Seregios, and I've really gone back and forth about Seregios because I really like Seregios, but I don't know. I feel like I almost want to put it in the D tier. And that's because I would put Seregios in this category of monsters that the way the star system works and the increased difficulty of the fights really can, for some monsters, take most of the fun out of the fights. And Seregios is one of those monsters. It hits really hard, it hits a lot really fast, and beating it while never feeling impossible, sometimes not even feeling extremely difficult, is just a trial in frustration more so than it is feeling like you're really getting the best of a monster. I feel like this hyper aggressive fighting style that we're seeing with certain monsters, because the hunter can be so aggressive, the hunter can be so reactive and so mobile, is it's losing something. It's losing something in the enjoyment of the fight that you don't have in fights that feel a little more tactical, a little more engaging. I don't really know how to put it, but I don't enjoy the fight the way I have in previous games, including 5th gen games, so D tier. It feels weird because I really like Seregios, and I've really liked his fight in other games, but it's something about the fighting style or the fighting philosophy in Wilds that makes that particular fight not that much fun. So moving on, Raidao, I put in S plus tier. I love its fight. I love its fight as it gets stronger, all the way up to Tempered and Arch Tempered Raidao. It's still a very enjoyable fight. It's still a very cool monster. I love the aspect of destroying the Fulgurite on its body so that it doesn't get the extra lightning attacks. I love any monster where doing damage towards a particular body part or breaking a particular part impacts the fight in a way that's beneficial to you. So not much more to say. Raidao is a great monster, one of my new favorite monsters, and it looks cool, and I never get tired of fighting it. Next, Lalabrina. Lalabrina, I think I want to put in the C tier. Now, I really like Lalabrina's design. I'm really glad we got another Temnoceran monster, and I really enjoy its weapons and armor, which is another thing that greatly influences how much I like a monster. Its weapons and armor are great. I use its paralysis weapons pretty much until the end of the base wild story, but the problem is its fight isn't all that interesting. And it can be a bit annoying too. It's jumping away from you to do its attacks, having you chase it back and forth. That can get pretty old. It's one of the reasons why I never learned to like certain monsters like Nargacuga, because it seems like they're constantly running away from you to prepare their attacks, and you're constantly chasing them around. And Lalabarina, not the most frustrating fight. It's certainly not punishing, but it's not that much fun. But I still really like the monster, and like I said, I like its weapons, and I like its design, so the C tier seems fine. Now, this is going to hurt a little bit, but Congalala I have to put in the F tier. I used to consider Congalala one of my top 10 favorite monsters, and in the older generations, I still do, but kind of in line with what I was saying with Seregios, there's something about how the new fight design in Wilds doesn't mesh well with certain monsters, and Congalala to me is one of those monsters. The thing I liked most about Congalala is it had so much personality for a monster, but a lot of that is lost in Wilds when, for example, if you're playing one of the older games, then Congalala, my dog is dreaming and making little dream sleep noises. But while you're fighting Congalala, to see it run away, to see it run to a mushroom patch, to eat a new mushroom, to gain a new breath ability, I really like that. But for example, you're able to chase them down so quickly on your secret and be so on top of them, you don't really get to see them exhibit some of that behavior. Unless you slow the fight down, you could purposely not hit them and just see what the monster does. And there's certainly nothing wrong with that, but you don't. It doesn't feel as organic to see how the monster responds over the course of a fight because the fight's moving so much faster. And that just doesn't seem to fit well with Congalala's style and what I liked most about him. So Congalala is one of those fights that unfortunately I feel like is not as good as it used to be, and it's definitely fallen from my favorite monsters list, if we're just counting wilds. Now next is Rathian. Now Rathian, I think I'll put up in the B tier. Rathian is a fight that I always enjoy, and I always like monsters that give you some kind of status that might not have the most difficult move set, but can be punishing. It's the type of monster that'll keep you on your toes, where you can't just bully it to death. And Rathian is one of those monsters for me. It's never my favorite fight, but it's never my least favorite fight either. I never mind doing it, and it's always good. So there's not much more to say about it besides that. I like Rathian. Its fight just seems to get slightly better over the course of evolving games from generation to generation. It's definitely not as annoying as it is in much older generations. It's one of those fights where I feel like the increased mobility of the hunter doesn't let you outpace the monster in terms of combat strength too much like it can with some of these other monsters, but instead puts you on a more even playing field that makes the fight more enjoyable. And I would say the exact same thing about Rathalos. Rathalos, like Rathian, in the older games has a lot of frustration in their fights, especially with your lack of mobility and the time it can take to drink potions, to take antidotes, and things like that. I think the monsters being so fast-paced fits much better with the pace your hunter can move now versus their fighting speed in older games. So Rathalos, still a very fun fight. I still really enjoy it, and so B tier. Now again, this is going to hurt a little bit, but I'm going to put Mitsutsume down in the D tier for the exact same reason as Seregios. There's something about the fact that you can only fight these monsters when they're at such high star levels, 8 star, 9 star, that For certain monsters, it works. For these two, I find the fights just to be a bit more frustrating and tedious than fun, or even really challenging. Uh, the monsters hit hard, they move fast, the attacks can be a bit sporadic, not anything that you can't possibly see coming, but not necessarily as intuitive with seeing some of their moves coming as some other monsters, and overall, the star system just pumping them up more and more. The higher you get, the less fun their fights get. A direct contrast to something like Raydao, or even Deshagama, to a point. And I'm going to take Legiacris and put him up in the A tier. Now, many of the things that I said about Seregios and Misitsune also apply to Legiacris, but a couple of things. One, I find Legiacris' fight much more interesting than both of them. I mean, Seregios really feels like he just does these constant sweep moves that will cleave half of the area that you could possibly be standing on, to the point where I don't even fight him unless I'm using a weapon that can block. And Legiacris' fight just has much more interesting moves coming from him. Not to mention his whole underwater segment, which would bump him up 2 tiers regardless. It's really good. And if I had decided to put it S tier, I decided not to because I felt like the gulf between the really great monsters and the just pretty good monsters was pretty wide. Then I might even put Legiacris into S tier, but I think A tier, even though, like I said about Mizitsune and Seregios, but to a slightly lesser extent, the star system definitely doesn't necessarily do him any favors. A lot of monsters have a bit of a sweet spot when it comes to difficulty. Some can be a little too easy, and the star system helps them out to make the fights better. Some feel a bit overtuned, and the star system just makes the fight drag on a little bit longer. And Legiacris, I definitely think the fight gets a little worse the higher the stars get. It's one of those things that you do for the challenge, you do to say you could do it, but wouldn't necessarily do a 9-star tempered for fun. Now, Uthduna, I would put in the A tier. I really enjoy Uthduna's fight. I really enjoy Uthduna's design. The veils, the water veils, are a little annoying. I've never quite understood exactly how they work. I just keep hitting them until they go away. But the fight overall, I do enjoy. But when you get to the tempered and especially arch-tempered versions, I don't enjoy it as much as, say, an arch-tempered Raydao. I did arch-tempered Uthduna, I think, once to do it, and never did it again. When Proof of a Hero Event Quest comes back around, because I didn't get a chance to do it this time, I'll do it then. But overall, I don't find the fight more enjoyable when you get to Arch Tempered, and the Tempered version is just kind of okay. I actually like Base Uthduna the most, I think, so that's why A tier. Still a really good fight, though. I just don't love him in all of his forms as much as, say, a Raydao. Now, Rompopolo, I'm actually going to be up in the B tier. In some part because I really like Rompopolo's unique design. I know I talk a lot about the fights and how I feel about the fights, but there's a lot that goes into how I feel about a monster. Its fight, its design itself, how much fun it is, how easy it is to try out new weapons against it, which is why I always have an affinity for low tier monsters, but also its armor, its weapons, everything. And Rompopolo, I think, has a really unique design for a monster. He's really fun to fight. I love breaking parts on a monster and having those broken parts either positively affect the fight or affect how the monster looks in a strong enough way. It makes it feel really rewarding for me. It's why Part Breaker is probably one of the least impactful abilities that I try to always have if I can. And Rompopolo, one of the few unique monsters in the Oilwell Basin. Also, a map I really like, but is really underrepresented with the amount of unique monsters that they get there. And I really like his armor. I really like his weapons. And yeah, I like the monster. I like it. I almost want to put it in the C tier, but I say B because I just like it. So, Ajarakan, instant S plus tier. Ajarakan was the first monster that I had any level of difficulty with in Wilds. I remember I was playing through the story mode pretty easily, not too much trouble, and then that first quest against the 2 Ajarakans, where you eventually take one and Olivia takes the other, I struggled a bit with that monster. It was a bit challenging for me, and afterwards I went and I made a point to hunt several of them over and over again to really get its moveset down, and I really liked it. I liked the level of challenge that I was getting. I liked learning his moveset. His weapons and armor honestly aren't my favorite, but I do like the cool design, and I like his design. I would love to see variants or subspecies of him in the future, and I really like him, and the increased star level, in contrast to some of the other monsters, I think makes his fight even better, because his moveset is more difficult than his damage output matches with when you first fight him, so making his damage more and more makes his moveset more and more punishing, and overall makes the fight more enjoyable. Now, for Gravios, no suspense, instant S plus tier. I really love Gravios. I've always loved Gravios. Even soloing G rank Gravios in the old gens, which was incredibly frustrating, I still really liked learning his fights. It was very enjoyable. I definitely have a lot of old gen bias towards Gravios, why I like it so much, but I think it looks amazing in Wilds, especially the tempered version. I really enjoy the fight. It's not as difficult as it was in older games, which you can say about a lot of returning monsters, but in a way that doesn't make the fight less enjoyable. I still really have fun with it, and as I've said before, I love any monster where one of the mechanics of the fight is break this part to make things easier. And Gravios is just cool. I only wish his weapons and armor were more of my style. It's not, but that's fine. So, New Udra. Again, no suspense, S plus tier. I love New Udra. I love that we are now having these cephalopod monsters. I hope we get many more of them in the Master Rank expansion. I hope we get more of them in the upcoming handheld game, whatever and whenever that'll be. But it was a really fun fight, and the Arch-Tempered version, to me, is probably the most fun version of the monster. So, again, there are certain monsters where making them more difficult makes the fight much more enjoyable. And for New Udra, that's definitely one of those monsters. The harder the fight got, the more I enjoyed it, and overall, it's a cool monster with cool fight and cool equipment, and I'm glad it's in the game. So next, Hirabami. I almost want to put Hirabami. I'll give him C tier because D feels like a very specific tier at this point. Monsters that I'm not wishing out of the game by any means, but aren't very happy with, and F are monsters that I almost wish weren't in the game. Hirabami is probably my least hunted monster. It's not a very interesting hunt. Its moveset is extremely simple. One of the most interesting things about it is the fact that it comes in a herd like the Deshagamas, but that really doesn't seem to play a part in the fight or in the environment all that much. I hope they do much more with that herd mechanic in the Master Rank expansion. But overall, Hirabami is just not that interesting. It's nice to have another, what is it, a Leviathan? I think skeleton in the game, and it's an interesting concept for a monster. Like this kind of floating on the wind style of monster. I would like to see more of something like that. I would like to see a subspecies of Hirabami where they improved the fight somewhat and gave him more to do. But overall, it's fine that he's there. His rank is more so for what it could mean going forward, but I'm not that much of a fan of him. So next is Nursilla. And I think I'm going to put Nursilla down here in the F tier, which hurts me to do because it's in the exact same boat as Congalala. Nursilla was one of my most favorite monsters, almost neck and neck with Congalala in my what I would have considered my top 10, but it's lost something in Wilds that really made me like it in the other games. Maybe because it doesn't have its particular area where it has its spider webs, where it can, climb around and attack you from above and try to spit poison down at you. Playing the old gen games, that was very unique and different and fun, and it was also the only Temnoceran at the time, which I definitely think could have influenced how much I liked it. I mean, now Arachnokadaki over all three, I guess five if you count the subspecies of Temnocerans, but Nursilla, not that great, and I feel like it has less to do in its fight, just like Congalala and Wilds, compared to older gens, and it's fine. It's fine. I might put him up to C, I think. Just because I think part of it is my disappointment is why I want to put it in F, but it is an okay fight, and I would say it's a little bit better than Congalala's fight. So, which Congalala, it feels like he should be too strong to be the punching bag that he is. But that's okay. Nursilla, I'll put her in a C tier for now. Now, Gypsaros, I think I want to put up in the B tier, definitely. Just like Yonkaku, it was another really annoying fight, almost for the exact same reasons. Flailing chicken style, not a huge fan of that. But in Wilds, it's a much more interesting fight. I enjoy it much more. The spamminess of some of the attacks aren't nearly as bad, and I really like what they did with its moveset, and Gypsaros looks really good in Wilds. So, like Gypsaros, just a little bit more than Yonkaku, but I'll put him in the B tier. Now, Blanganga, I think I'll put in the C tier, which, to be clear, is not bad. C is fine. It's a fine monster. Yes, it's pretty close to the D's, which I had a lot of negative things to say about, but C is fine, and Blanganga is fine. It's not as difficult as it was in the previous gen games, but that's not really a positive or a negative. It's what I kind of wish Congalala's fight was. I do get that he's one tier above Congalala, but there's just enough difficulty there to make the fight a little more interesting, a little more fun. His little Blingos seem like they get into the fight way more than the little Congas. They are Congas, right? I think so. The arena event quest with the 3 tempered Blangangas was legitimately difficult to do in a very fun way. So, yeah, I'd say C. If I only judged him off that event quest, I'd probably give him a B or an A. A bit influenced by the fact that most of the versions of him that I fought were frenzied, so they were pretty fast fights. Let's see. Now next, there's Gormagala, and I think I would put Gormagala up in the A tier. Now, I've never been one of those people that loved Gormagala that much. I've always liked it. I've always liked Shagaru way more. But it is a good fight. It is a good monster. It's appropriately threatening and dangerous. Uh, Not much more to say besides that. It's a good fight. It's good even when he's extremely difficult, but just never been my favorite version of Gormagala. Uh, so A tier. If there was a Shagaru, I'd probably put Shagaru in S plus. So Jindahad, I would put Jindahad in, I think, B tier. Yeah, I think I would put Jindahad as the lowest of the Apexes. Now, the first time I saw Jindahad, he shot up to being my second favorite of the Apexes after New Udra. But And I would still say I still like him more than Uthduna, but Jindahad's fight, once you get past the breaking the plates mechanic, isn't all that interesting. And the breaking the plates mechanic can be a bit frustrating depending on what weapon you're using. And I do feel like he is my least favorite of all of the Arch-Tempered fights. So, good fight, good monster, great weapon designs, but yeah, I'd put him in B tier. Now, Guardian Deshagama, I think B tier for the exact same reasons as Deshagama. It's a good introductory monster to the Guardian mechanic, and there's not much else to it besides that. So, Guardian Ebony Odogaron, A tier. If I was going just on heavy personal bias, I might want to put it up in the S plus tier, but I really loved Guardian Ebony Odogaron in Wilds. It was actually my favorite, what I would call training dummy monster. Whenever I wanted to try out a new weapon style, because I was at that point in the game, I would prefer to fight Guardian Ebony Odogaron. I'm just going to start saying Ebony Odogaron because the fight is engaging in a way I like. The monster can be kind of all over and on top of you, but I don't mind that so much within reason. You know, crank it up 3 more levels and you have Seregios, but where Ebony Odogaron is, I think is perfect for that style of fight, and it's a really fun fight. It's the kind of fight that you can't sleepwalk through, which can get old. It's fun to bully the occasional Chotacabra, but sometimes you want to be a little more engaged, and Ebony Odogaron to me gives me that level of engagement, and definite bias just because I fought so many of them. I might have fought more of them than any other monster, now that I'm thinking about it. Not counting before the event quests. So next, Guardian Fulgur Anjanath, I think I'd put in the B tier. It's a fun fight. It feels much easier than I remember Fulgur Anjanath being in World and Iceborne. Um, Not too easy, but almost on the cusp of too easy. It's fun because he has the Wilk mechanic with doing the lightning explosions, and he's not easy, but for the level of monster he is and the point of gear and abilities that you're at when you fight him, it's just not much to him. You get through the fight, and it's fine. You know, it's fine. So, B tier sounds good to me. Now, Guardian Rathalos I'd put up in the A tier. I really loved Guardian Rathalos' fight, and I already thought that Rathalos had a really good fight, but the extra explosions of Guardian Rathalos made the fight much more interesting. A small change, but it still made it more interesting to me. His design looks really good. His skill Scorcher was interesting, even though they had a couple of variations of that in the game. Plus, his opening in the game was very cool, so A tier. Next, Zuwu. And Zuwu up there in the S plus tier. It's a cephalopod, it looks cool, it has some of, if not the most gorgeous weapons in the game. I love the layered armor for Zuwu, and that I remember the moment where it first did its dash at you from across the screen and you saw its underside and like the huge mouth underneath, and I thought that was extremely cool. And I also remember fighting several of them before I properly countered that move to knock it on its back so that that part was exposed to do extra damage. That was really fun to me. Overall, just a fun fight. Interesting monster. I hope we see many more cephalopods. Next monster. So next is Guardian Arkveld. Now, this was a bit of a disappointment for me in Wilds. For it to be the flagship, I really never cared that much for Arkveld. It was fine. Its fight was fine. A little bit leaning towards the style of fight that I don't love. That would have landed him in the D tier. But no, it's not nearly that bad. But it also, to me, was never all that interesting. It was never all that fun. It was a decent challenge. As a near end of story monster, it was a fine challenge. And that's about all I could say for it. Its skills, the way they were set up at the end of base Wilds, unfortunately, were very underwhelming, so wasn't that interested in his armor set. Even Flared to be the unique skill for the flagship monster of the game just wasn't very impressive, and the fight to me wasn't really all that, so C tier. Now, Omega I put up in the S plus tier. Base Omega I would put in the A tier. It was a fun fight, very learnable. I like the almost action game, which is funny to say because Wilds is an action game, but it's a hunting game. It's a Monster Hunter game. But I like the action game style of play where he's using very specific moves and you have very specific ways you counter or avoid them. But then Savage Omega to me pushes it up to S plus tier. Savage Omega was extremely fun and extremely frustrating, but in a good way. It was a good challenge that you felt good about when you finally overcame it and never felt so tedious. Every time I died, well, not every time. I was about to lie. I was about to say I knew what I did wrong. Savage Omega was a bit overtuned. It did have a couple of wombo combos that you're going to, if he does these three moves in a row, that's going to be a card. And that's really unfortunate. Sometimes you could fail the DPS check with the Nacilla, using the same strategy and using the same weapon and the same moves that let you pass the check the three times before. So it definitely had its frustrations, but overall it was a very fun fight and it was a great challenge fight. So I really enjoyed it. So S plus tier. Now, Guardian Archveld I put up in the A tier mainly because of its Arch-Tempered fight. And a lot of the things that I would say about Omega, I would say about Arch-Tempered Archveld. It was very challenging, not quite so learnable. The moves weren't so clearly telegraphed, which is fine, but I did in particular like that about Omega. But Arch-Tempered Archveld, for a final title update, big boss of the flagship version, I did like the fight, and yes, I did it a handful of times to make the full armor set, and just like with Arch-Tempered Uthduna, we'll probably never do it again until I take a crack at the Proof of a Hero event quest, because it's more challenge than fun, but it's a good challenge that I enjoyed. Just not one I would do over and over for no good reason. So I put him at A. Zoshia I put up in the S plus tier. And the S plus tier I now see is getting a little bloated, but that's okay because I don't think I would move anybody. But Zoshia was a great final boss for the base story of Wilds. It was a fun fight. It was a good spectacle fight. There was enough danger in it that you weren't sleepwalking through it, even though it was a spectacle fight. And I really like what it could mean, what the implications could be for the future of what other kind of versions of Zoshia we could see, or maybe a fully evolved or full power Zoshia. Very disappointed we didn't get an Arch-Tempered Zoshia. That's a monster I would have enjoyed suffering through the pain of a 10-star, I guess, Arch-Tempered. As it is, fighting the newest release version, which I think was a 10-star. I didn't even have an interest in doing it because you didn't get any unique rewards, and if there was going to be nothing about the fight except it hit a little harder, then it just wasn't a reason for me to do it. But I would have loved if it got the Arch-Tempered Archveld treatment where it actually got a completely new move set, which I didn't mention was another reason why Arch-Tempered Archveld got so much higher than base Archveld. It's a completely different fight. And yes, it's punishing, but it's punishing in a way that's more engaging, more interesting. There's more mechanics to deal with, and that bumped it up for me. Same goes for Zoshia, but I would like to see an actual revamp improvement on the fight, especially in master rank, versus just it hit harder. That was too bad that we didn't get an Arch-Tempered. And finally, Gogmazios, I put in the S plus tier. I really enjoyed this fight, and after 5 or 10 times, I still really enjoyed the fight. The only thing that brings the monster down for me is the RNG grind of its materials and how I don't want to do the fight 20 more times to do several Gogma Ardian rolls to still not get any skills I want. That's not the best thing ever. And I do wish I liked the armor set more. I really don't care for it much. But I love the weapons, and I love the breakdown of the fight. The whole thing was very enjoyable to me. The DPS check made me sit at the edge of my seat every time. Even though a couple of times I failed it, it never felt very unfair. Looking at you, Savage Omega, with your very unfair Nurcilla. There were times where that Nurcilla just would not die, and you'd get tripped, and you'd get stunned, and you'd get knocked down. Pretty frustrating now that I remember it. But Gogmazios, the DPS check wasn't so bad. I like the spectacle of the fight. I never get tired of using the giant cannon whose name I can't remember now, but the whole thing was very cool, very fun, very final bossy. It's weird to say again because Wilds actually has several final boss monsters, but I'd put it in the S plus tier. So that's my list for all the monsters in Wilds, mostly top heavy. I mostly liked all of the monsters. Only a few I didn't really care for. I hope I feel differently about Mitsune and Seregios in Master Rank. I hope the balance gets a little bit closer to what I would find enjoyable, but that's just me. Maybe some other people really like them in their current incarnations. But that's it for me. Thank you, everybody. I completely failed to make this video as short as I thought it would be, but that's okay. One of these days, I'll have a sub 20-minute video. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed yourselves. Please like, comment, and subscribe if you feel so inclined, and have a nice day.